Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another live stream with me, Lara Ryan from Complete Test Success. So today I'm going to try and help you with grammar a little bit. Usually when we're looking at writing, we'll look at your grammar mistakes. I'll tell you kind of what your mistakes are, but I just want to help you with complex sentences a little bit more today. And I want to explain the grammar mistakes in a bit more detail than I normally would, let's say, when we're just writing an essay together. So what we're going to do today, to begin with, I have this question. It's a task 2 question. I'd discuss both views and give your own opinion. So, very common task 2 question type, probably the second most common of the task 2 question types. And here, some people believe that the government should be responsible for their citizens' health, while others say that it is the individual's responsibility. Now, we're not necessarily writing an essay today, but we'll just look at the grammar. So I think the first thing I'd like to do is get you guys to paraphrase that question, but I want you to paraphrase it without using the word while. All right, and that's kind of the key here is let's see what other grammar structures you guys can use. So paraphrase the question without using the word while or the cohesive device while. And what that does is it forces you to change the structure in some way. So that's the task I have for you, first of all. And if we're not going to use the word while, you need some other type of cohesive device instead. And that might mean that you need to change the grammar structure to match that. So that's the first thing I want you to do. Normally, if we were writing an essay, I would say use whatever words you want. If you want to use the word while, then use the word while. There's nothing wrong with using the word while, and you shouldn't avoid it. But for the sake of today's lesson, to just try and focus on improving your grammar, or at least looking at a wider range of grammar structures, I'm putting in that little extra requirement. But that doesn't mean that you should feel obliged to do that when you're writing your real essay. This is just, we're focusing on grammar today, so for that purpose only. Okay, so I'll give you guys a minute. Paraphrase that question. Share your paraphrase with me in the comments, and then I will go through your paraphrase. I'll point out any mistakes you're making, and I'll explain, the reasons behind those grammar issues that you have. Okay, so just give you guys another 2 minutes, and then we'll take a look at what you've written. So 2 more minutes. Okay, and 1 more minute. I'll get you guys to share what you've written with me, and then we'll go through it together. So 1 more minute. Paraphrase that question and share it with me in the comments. Okay. So that's 2 minutes. So initially, when I look at this sentence, when we're talking about grammar at least, I'm just thinking about how can I swap that around in terms of the structure. The easiest thing to do really is going to be just to change the cohesive device, and that will give me a different structure at least. So I could say whereas. So instead of saying while, I can just swap it for whereas like that. But we also have the opportunity to put whereas at the beginning of the sentence. So it doesn't have to be exactly like that. So we could put whereas at the front. So like this. Whereas some people believe that the government should be responsible for their citizens' health. Others say that it is the individual's responsibility. So I can go either way. I can have whereas in the middle of the sentence. So basically we have the comma and then whereas. So that separates, or that connects the two clauses. Or I can have whereas at the front here with a comma here. And either of those are acceptable. It doesn't really matter which way around we do it. But for the sake of variety, it's good to mix it up a little bit rather than just doing the same thing every time. If we use a wider range of structures and more variety in our presentation, that is going to improve our grammar. Hey, Daniel, good to see you here. Hi, Wang, long time no see. Okay, so Wang has another one with although, so that's another good way to change this. So give me a moment just to grab Wang's sentence and then we'll look at that. For some reason, Wang's sentence is not showing up on my comments, but I can still look at it from here. Okay, so Wang said, although there are people, do you know what, I'm going to try and type this up because we do need to look at it. Okay. So although there are people who think that the government should respond to the health of the citizens. Others perceive that it is the responsibility of the individuals. Okay, so what Wang has done here with the cohesive device although is good. So here we have although this, comma, that. So that's the same thing I did with the word whereas. Now, we can put whereas at the start of the sentence. We can put although at the start of the sentence. That's fine. But you cannot put although in the middle of the sentence the way we had whereas in the middle of the sentence. So whereas can go at the start or the middle. Although can only go at the beginning. So just be careful when you're using although that you use it at the start. But you do have the option to mix it up a bit when it comes to the word whereas. While is the same. You can use while at the start or the middle. Okay. Although there are people, now you need a relative clause here, because think of it this way. Look, although there are people think. So we have a verb here and a verb here. But the basic structure of a sentence is subject plus verb plus object. So in one clause, we cannot have two verbs. You cannot go subject plus verb plus subject plus verb. It doesn't work like that. So what happens is we actually need a new clause. If we need to use a second verb, we need a new clause. So what's missing then is we need to have who. So we use the word who. This is a relative pronoun. And what that means is I'm now starting a new clause, and that allows me to use another verb because it's no longer the same clause. So although there are people who think that the government should respond to the health of the citizens, now here, the word respond, this isn't a grammar mistake, this is a vocab mistake. But the word respond is like, I ask you something and you respond. So that's how you respond, is you reply basically, or you answer back. So the word respond wouldn't mean to be responsible for. It doesn't have the same meaning. So in terms of the vocab, that would be incorrect. And it would be better just to copy the same word from the question. And this is something that I'll always teach my students is when you're paraphrasing a question, students have this desire to change everything, but that's not really how it works. It's, yeah, you change the words you can change, but you should copy the words you can't change. It would be better to copy a word than to change it incorrectly. If you change it incorrectly, it might become unclear. It might change the meaning. It might end up having a different meaning to the one that you had to the original question statement. So when it comes to vocab, don't worry too much about changing everything. Just change what you can change correctly and copy the other stuff. To the health of citizens, comma, others perceive that it is the responsibility of the individuals. We don't need the word the before individuals. We're just talking about individuals more generally. Now, up in the question, it said the individual's responsibility. So why are we using the article up here? Well, we're using article up here because it's a specific responsibility. What responsibility? The responsibility of the individuals. That's it's a specific type of responsibility. So up here, we're using an article because responsibility is specific. It's a specific responsibility of the individuals. Whereas down here, we're not using article with individuals because we're not talking about a specific group of individuals. We use the word they to talk about a specific group. But here, we're just talking about individuals in general. If you wanted to talk about the individuals from a specific country, that's fine, because now it's a specific group of individuals. Okay, so that's Wang's. Ahmed, you're on Facebook. So again, give me a moment. Let me just try and find that. And then I'll copy and paste it onto the screen. I'm not sure what's going on today. I can't find Ahmad's. I can't find Ahmad's answer to copy and paste it. I mean, ideally, if I could copy and paste it, that's going to be a lot easier. But for some reason, there's something wrong. So, okay. Let me just type it up again. It's easier for me to explain what the mistakes are when we have it typed up. So this is a bit cumbersome, not ideal. Normally I can just copy and paste from Facebook and YouTube, but for whatever reason today, it's not happening. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, very likely. Okay, so anyway, some individuals feel that the population's health is the responsibility of the government. Others, on the other hand, believe that everyone is responsible for their own health. On the other hand isn't a conjunction like this. You would have to use some kind of a conjunction. You could say, but, however, something like that. So there are cohesive devices that act as a grammar, as like a conjunction that they can connect clauses together. But on the other hand, isn't one of those. So think of on the other hand more as it's adding information, but it's not actually connecting the clauses. So you need a conjunction of some description. So you could say whereas others, but others, however others, something like that to connect them. The rest of the paraphrase is good. It's just that. You could also just make it 2 sentences. So you could have a full stop, and then you could have a new sentence. You could say full stop, others on the other hand. And if it was 2 sentences, you wouldn't need a conjunction to connect them. But the way you've done it here isn't appropriate. I think it's better to find some way to connect the 2 of them together, though, rather than writing it as 2 individual sentences, because the range of grammar structures you use is an important aspect of your it's an important aspect of your grammar score. So you want to make sure that you're doing that where possible. Okay, so next, Brian DeLeon. Am I overthinking this? It doesn't seem like a binary or a case of fundamental opposites. I have no idea what that means. Daniel, whereas some contend that the citizens' health is the government's responsibility. Let me see, do I have that? Okay, yeah, that one is in the YouTube comments, so I can just copy and paste that. Okay, so you're doing the right thing here with whereas this, comma, that. So you're using whereas correctly. Like I said earlier, we could put whereas in the middle. So if you wanted, you could just start with the word some here and put the word whereas in here. Either way is fine. So whereas some contend that the citizens' health. Now, it's not the citizens' health and the government. So when we want to use the, we're talking about a specific group. So if you say the government, well, which government are you talking about? Right? Now, if we were living in the same country as one another and you said the government, I would know you're talking about the government in the country where we are. But you can't just say the government in general. So here we have a problem with the usage of articles. So what we can do is we can make government plural. We can make government plural. That would be acceptable. So if we make government plural, we're talking about governments from all the different countries. Okay, so we can do that. So we can say it is government's responsibility. So every country has their own government. We're talking about all of those different governments. Or we can say a government, and we're just talking about not a particular one, just one of them, whichever one. So whereas some contend that citizens' health, so citizens in general, is a government's responsibility. Or we can say, sorry, no, let me get that right, is a government's responsibility, so apostrophe S, like that. Or we can just say government in general, government's responsibility. Others think that it is the citizens themselves who should be responsible for it. So what is it? Responsible for it. Citizens' health. The responsibility for should be responsible for this. So yeah, just be careful with the article. Especially we see this mistake a lot with government. Like that. Hi, Gwaramboy, good to see you here. Hi, Olivia from Cameroon. Welcome to the lesson. No problem, Juan. My pleasure. You're very welcome. Gwaramboy, what do you think that some IELTS instructors think that to get higher score, candidates should change the grammar? I mean, paraphrasing the introduction is not enough. What is the best introduction? I mean, if you can change the grammar, you should. if you can change the grammar, you should. That's a sign of having good grammar. But what happens if you're not capable of changing your grammar? What if your grammar isn't good enough to use a different structure, and then you start making mistakes and it becomes unclear? So it's not that everybody should try to use a different structure every time. It's that you should do the best you can with your current level of English. And of course, someone who's a higher level than you, they will change it more than you do. And someone who's a lower level than you, they'll change it less than you do. So to be able to do it is a sign of having good English. But it doesn't mean that you should try to do it if you can't do it. So it really depends on the student. You can't just say everybody should try to change the grammar, like completely change the grammar all the time. Well, what happens for lower level students? They'll end up writing something that's completely unclear and getting a low score. So you just need to be careful that you're being clear and that it's got the same meaning. That would be more important. Brian DeLeon, there is a divide over who bears greater responsibility for maintaining public health. There is a divide over who bears greater responsibility for maintaining public health. Those who believe this is the government's duty are contrasted by some who assert individual accountability. Yeah, that's good, but overly complicated. So just one moment, I want to check something here. I don't know, it doesn't really, to be honest, it feels like something that's written by AI. Like, I mean, it's technically accurate and all the language has been changed around, and it looks, I mean, technically it's good, but it doesn't really sound like a person normally sounds. To be honest, it feels like something written by AI. So if you're using AI, then I mean, it doesn't really show much in terms of what you are or are not capable of. Crusoe Cool, hi there. While many believe that people's healthcare should be responsible by their government. Okay, so you've got a few things mixed around here. Let me find that. Okay, again, for some reason, I really don't know what's going on with the comments today, but that didn't show up on Facebook either. Okay, so you're using while correctly. So while many believe this, comma, others believe that. That's fine. You said, while many believe that the people's health. Now, we're not talking about a specific group of people. When we use the article the, it's a specific group. And you have to think about, what does the listener know? Does the listener know which group of people you're talking about? And when I read this, I don't. Are you saying like, while many people believe that the people in my country's healthcare should be taken care of by the government? Like, which group of people are you talking about? And this question isn't really talking about a group of people. It's just saying in general, this is what should happen. Now, so we need to remove that. While many people believe that people's healthcare should be responsible by, now that's a collocation. You're trying to use a passive structure, but it should be their responsibility of, which you can see. You've tried to swap it around. You're trying to use a passive structure, and you're not using it accurately. If you struggle with passive structures, it's okay to just use it, use an active structure. I mean, eventually you will need to master passive structures. In task 1, they're very important for maps and process questions as well. But for the sake of this question, just make your life easier. Just say, well, many believe that governments should be responsible for people's healthcare. Keep it as active, it might be easier for you. So then, comma, some support the opinion. You don't really support the opinion, they have the opinion. You can support the idea or have the opinion. So some support the idea that they should take care of this themselves. So in here, you're after talking about 2 groups of people. You've said, or more than that, really. You have many people believe, so that's one group of people, the people who believe it. People's healthcare, so that's people in general. You've talked about the government, that's another group of people. And then you said some support the opinion. So really, you've mentioned 4 groups of people here. And then when you say they should take care of this themselves, well, which of those 4 groups of people are you referring to? And that's not clear. So that would be a mistake in terms of your coherence and cohesion. You would need to get that written accurately. You would need to make it clear who you're talking about. So instead of saying they here, you want to say individuals or people, something like that. Another one that we didn't have would be to use however. Let me go back to the original actually. So we had a few varieties. We had while, whereas, however, although. Sorry, we didn't have however. Now, if you want to use however, the punctuation's a bit unusual. So you go semicolon, however, and then comma. So you can also use however to connect the 2 clauses in this way. However cannot be used at the start of the sentence in the way that whereas is used at the start. While can be used at the start. We used although at the start. However, you can only use it in the middle to connect to connect 2 clauses. If you use however at the start, you're connecting this sentence with the previous sentence. So just make sure that you're using that correctly. All right. So does anyone have any questions for me, or does anyone want to talk about anything at the moment? You're very welcome. No problem at all. So I'm not going to do much more. I'm going to finish up a bit earlier today. If anyone wants to talk about anything, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up here a bit earlier than usual. Okay, seems like you're all good. All right, so just be careful. Those of you I pointed out your mistakes, make sure to learn from those. And for the rest of you, just try and remember we have a variety like while, whereas, although, however, and make sure not to put them in the wrong part of the sentence. How to improve clarity? Well, clarity is just about mistakes. You know, if you're making vocab mistakes, that can make your writing unclear. If you're making grammar mistakes, that can make your grammar unclear. But what you need to be careful with is that it kind of goes on a scale. So like, let's say if we're talking about grammar, right? So what happens is some people, they're going to go, okay, I'm going to be really, really clear and I'm going to make no mistakes whatsoever. And my accuracy is really, really high. So really, really accurate, really, really clear. But look what happened to the range. The range goes down. And then some people go the other way. Some people try to improve their range and their accuracy goes down. So they get a low score for that. So you're trying to find a balance. If you focus too much on accuracy, you get a low score because of a lack of range. If you focus too much on range, you get a low score because of poor accuracy. So it's finding that balance between those two. If you're pushing yourself beyond your ability, that's very often where people make mistakes. When I have students who join my courses first, very often what will happen is they're focusing on using a massive range of vocab. They never want to use the same word twice. They don't want to use the words that were in the question. They're trying to find many different ways to say things differently. So they keep on forcing themselves to make mistakes that they didn't need to make. They could have just used the same word 5 or 6 times and it would have been completely clear. But they're so adamant that they want to change the vocab all the time. They end up making mistakes that they shouldn't make. So very often I'll see, like when students will join my course, they might end up getting a band 5 for vocab, not because their vocab is bad, but because they're, just pushing themselves beyond their ability. The way I refer back to things is confusing sometimes. So you just have to put yourself in the place of the reader. Like, does the reader know what you're talking about? Have you given the reader enough information to follow what you're saying? And if you've changed topic, or, if you've been talking about a few different people, like we saw with Crusoe Cool here, there's been a whole different group, let me try that again. There were 4 different groups of people being discussed. So the word they doesn't obviously refer to any of them. So it's about just kind of imagining the experience that the reader is going to have as they're going through your writing. Are they going to know that who you're talking about when you use a pronoun? If you're changing topic, have you told them that you've changed topic? It's not just about you writing down what you're thinking. It's about you helping the reader follow what you're saying. What I see a lot as well is when people don't plan their essay first. If they don't plan their essay first and they just write the essay from their own thoughts. So as they're writing the essay, it's kind of like, okay, now I'm going to say this. Okay, now I'm going to say that. So as they're going along, it's just it's just kind of their thoughts. As their thoughts came to their mind, they go directly onto the page. And it can be much less clear when you write that way, because you didn't know what you're going to say next. You mightn't have even noticed that you've changed topic. This is just what came to your mind. So planning your essay in advance can really help with that as well, in terms of logical organization, progression, logically sentences leading from one to the next more obviously. And if you already know that, okay, this is my first idea and I'm going to talk about that. When I'm finished, I'm going to talk about this second idea. If you've already planned that, you'll know very clearly that you are changing from the first idea to the second idea, and you can make it clear that you're doing that for the reader too. Does reading articles on a topic help to improve writing? About writing topics. For vocab, if you're studying vocab, it's good to read and find the vocab you want. Like, let's say, for example, if you are doing any part of the test, writing task 2, reading, listening, speaking, and you get a topic and you realize, okay, this topic is very difficult for me because I don't have any vocab for this particular topic. So what you might find is, just say, for example, you're asked about sport and you've no interest in sport. You don't have any vocab to talk about sport. Pay attention to that. It's like, okay, I've noticed that there's a gap in my knowledge. When this topic comes up, I'm struggling. So start reading articles related to sport and start learning kind of the typical words that will be useful if that topic comes up in your test again. So being aware of what topics you are not comfortable with and using that knowledge to, strengthen your vocab in that area is a good idea. Daniel, my pleasure. You're very welcome. And Olivia, there has been a lot of debate about who should be responsible for people's health. I don't particularly like these sentences because it's kind of these pre-learned phrases. There has been a lot of debate about, well, has there been a lot of debate? We don't know if these people have been debating one another. The question just said that there are 2 groups of people with different opinions. It doesn't necessarily mean that, they're meeting up and having, debates about who's right and who's wrong. It's just that these 2 groups of people exist. Are they debating each other or not? It doesn't say. They might be, they might not be, we don't know. So if you learn this phrase, like there has been a lot of debate about something, it just looks like you learned that because you want to use it in the IELTS test. Like maybe you had an IELTS teacher who told you just learn this sentence and use it in your essay. But what can happen then is it can affect your coherence and cohesion score. Now here, at least your sentence is who should be responsible for people's health. So you have made this sentence about the topic of the question, so it's okay. But some people, they'll have a full sentence with no connection to the topic, and that would bring down their coherence and cohesion score. So I'd say just paraphrase the question. The question didn't say anything about a lot of debate, so I don't think you should. I think you should just say what the question says. Your second sentence, then you said some, that should be a capital letter. So some think the government should be responsible, and then you need a comma before while, comma, while others say individuals should own up for their own health. Own up wouldn't be the right word. Should take responsibility, be responsible for, whatever way you want to say it. But to own up isn't accurate, so that's a vocab mistake. Hey, Ty. Hello, I normally can think of an example, but an invented statistics one. How can I think of one that helps support my main point? I would just say, like, just talk about it like it's a real thing that's happened, you know? So it doesn't need to be an example where you say something like, 100% of people do the thing that I just said. It could be, for example, in my city, it's common to see people, leaving for work early because the traffic is so bad that they would be late for work otherwise. Just talk about something that's a real thing that's really happening rather than a statistic. Olivia, in this essay, I will discuss both views and take a stand. Exactly, yeah. So that would be counted as mechanical. You could get a band 6 for coherence and cohesion using a mechanical sentence like that. So that's a sentence. It doesn't show that you've read the question. It doesn't show that you understand what you're talking about. Just completely taking one sentence, you've learned it before the test, you put that into your essay, and it doesn't show any knowledge of or any response to the actual question. So at least in that first sentence here, you said responsible for people's health. So it made it look like at least you were talking about the question. But this one here, it's just, completely separate from the question. You could write this in any essay that says discuss both views and give your own opinion. You wouldn't even need to change one word. So that's not a good idea. Please conduct online lessons as much as possible. I will. I'll be back next week. I'll do another one next week. Next week, we will focus on, let me see, general training, task 1, general training. So I'll be back then. Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining. See you all next week. Take care of yourselves. Bye.